Hey everybody, I have a video here for you today, and I really am prepared for this, but I'm just going to speak off the top of my head. I think this is a pretty cool site, and I just want to talk about this briefly. I have documented many ancient sites in Egypt, and I've showed you the tombs of quite a few pharaohs, and most of them pharaohs are from the 18th and 19th dynasty in that area, coming from about 3,500 years ago. But this is a tomb of a first dynasty pharaoh, Pharaoh Den. And this is ancient Abydos, about 250 miles south of Giza and the Great Pyramid. But out here, just about a half a kilometer from the Nile Valley, is an ancient necropolis. And this comes from the very first dynasty, and all that you can really see is this here, and this is the tomb of Pharaoh Den. I'll zoom in on this, just show you what it looks like from overhead on Google Earth. I'll show you a couple pictures really quick. Here you see what this looks like, unattended, no fanfare, not much going on here, but a tomb of a first dynasty pharaoh. And we got one more picture here. And obviously the sand cleared away a little better in this picture. And I want to show you what it looks like here. This is another picture of it. And he was the 5th pharaoh of the very first dynasty. And this is what the necropolis looks like under the sand at Abydos. Here on Google Earth you can really tell that there is stuff under the sand, but it's not really excavated. But from overhead you can get a kind of a hint at what it looks like. And this is the diagram of what lies beneath the sand. There is an ancient cemetery and tombs coming from some people associated with the first dynasty. And it's sitting out there unattended, ancient Abydos. This is what the tomb of Pharaoh Den looks like. A main king's chamber with a stairway coming down, and then little cubicles which are subsidiary tombs, people associated with Pharaoh Den. And not much has been found in here. This was looted maybe as long as 4,000 years ago. But the tomb floor is built of red granite, so the 4th dynasty and the structures up at Giza wasn't the first time that red granite was used. Pharaoh of the first dynasty has red granite in his tomb floor. Now just a few things have been found in this tomb, but they kind of give a hint of what was going on back here in ancient Egypt about 5,000 years ago. And here is an ivory label, and I've showed this before briefly in a video. This is Pharaoh Den in the classic posture of pharaohs, and this is how they were depicted for 3,000 years. And I have read many stories where they say this is the classic posture of the pharaohs, but I haven't heard too many, if any, say that this is in the posture of the constellation of Orion. And I have showed countless pharaohs being depicted in this in previous videos. But going back to that ivory label here at the top, you see what we know today as the Sphinx in its original form as Anubis. Here is Horus being represented as the falcon, and this little square here is, I can't remember what this is called. It's not called the cartouche, but it supposedly shows a view from the pharaoh's palace. And here we see 3 peaks in the background, so you can just speculate on what that represents. But here he is smiting a ruler from the east, and supposedly he had some skirmishes with Bedouin tribes and people from the east, they are described as. And also found was this depicted on wood here, and you see the Horus falcon representation, and you see other things transcribed. Down here you see a story written out in these hieroglyphs, I guess you could call them as, or these symbols. And this at the bottom right, I guess, depicts a story of a daughter of his that was suffering greatly from a disease. Here in the top right, you have him running in the Sed festival, which is the running with the Apis bull. And here, this representation of him, he kind of is in the form of Orion, you could say, also in the posture of Orion. And the Sed festival, they ran with the Apis bull, and I believe that is just a celestial story. Ancient Egyptians and other ancient cultures would, transcribe the stories from their heavens down to stories on earth, and the stories on earth, they would kind of play them in an allegorical tale with the heavens. And I believe the running with the Apis bull, running is just a celestial competition or a celestial battle going on. And is this similar in other cultures? Yes. You are all familiar, I'm sure, with Gilgamesh, and I have made a video where I believe Gilgamesh is just a celestial tale being told in allegorical terms. And this comes from ancient origins, and I'm just going to read. In stellar terms, the illusion is again quite plain. The axe in the right hand, the bow in the left hand, the sword hanging from his prominent belt. Surely Gilgamesh was not a king, but this was instead the Sumerian name for the constellation of Orion. Take a quick look at the diagram of Orion and see all the similarities that are attributed to Gilgamesh. The club, axe, bow, belt, and sword. And he is in a battle with the bull, which is a representation of Taurus. It is a celestial tale. I'm not going to go into this a lot, but I will leave this link below. But I also believe this story of the Pharaoh Den coming from the age of Taurus, and that's why animals are represented in certain ways in Egyptian tales. You have the avenue of the ram sphinxes coming from places in Egypt, and that just is symbolic of the age of Aries, the lamb and the ram, and the age of the Apis bull is symbolic of the age of Taurus coming from Egypt, and this is a story of the Pharaoh Den in the age of Taurus running a battle or a competition, running with the Apis bull in the Sed festival. I believe that is just a similar celestial tale as the Sumerians wrote about Gilgamesh, but I'm not going to go into that a lot, but I thought I would mention that. And going over to touregypt.net, and I'll leave this link below, it says this: one of the most important festivals related to kingship was the Sed festival, also frequently referred to as the Royal Jubilee or simply the Sed festival. This significant celebration was a ritual during which the king's right to rule and his royal powers were renewed. There are many representations of this festival which normally depicts the king running alongside the Apis bull in order to prove his fitness to rule. And I believe it is told in an allegorical tale in the heavens, in that little emblem coming from his tomb, and also in the story of Gilgamesh. I believe it's the same thing being depicted. And it also says it's a very ancient jackal god who may have been an independent deity, or alternatively related in some way to the jackal god Wepawat, who was the same as Anubis, the Greek name Anubis, was closely related to kingship ideology and the ancient Sed festival. And the reason why this jackal god was closely related to kingship ideology is because it is the representation of what we know today as the Sphinx. That was the original name of the Sphinx. He is the preeminent god of resurrection, and he was the guardian of the necropolis. And going over to Google Earth here at ancient Abydos, when we pull out of this location of the tomb of Pharaoh Den, this mountain here right next to this necropolis is called the Mountain of Anubis. I've made a video about that, and I will leave that link below. But what we know of Pharaoh Den, he was the 5th ruler of the first dynasty. He came to power maybe at the age of 10. His mother might have ruled for just a short period while he aged and became old enough to take over the rule of the Pharaoh of Egypt. And he ruled anywhere from between 30 and 50 years, and there is some documentation of his life, his wars, where he traveled to, festivals he attended, and things like that. But that is the location and the story briefly of Pharaoh Den. Hope you thought this was interesting, and you have a nice day.